Open an English Bible. Turn to almost any page of the Old Testament. You will find a word printed in a strange way. The Lord. 4 small capital letters. Most people read right past it. But that word is hiding something. It is not really a translation. It is a substitute. Behind those 4 capitals stands a name, a personal name, the name the God of Israel gave for himself. It is written with 4 Hebrew letters. And here is the strange part. No one today knows for certain how to say it. The Jews stopped speaking it. The sound was lost. Centuries later, by accident, it became Jehovah. Scholars now rebuild it as Yahweh. This episode is the story of that name. 4 letters. Yod, He, Wow, He. In English letters, YHWH. Scholars call it the Tetragrammaton. The word only means 4 letters. It is the most common word in the whole Hebrew Bible. It appears about 6,800 times. No other name comes close. Stop and weigh that. The most frequent word in the entire book is the one name we are least sure how to pronounce. It is everywhere in the text, and it is silent on our tongues. To understand why, we have to go back to a bush in the desert. The name has a beginning in the story. It comes at a bush that burns but is not consumed. Moses stands there. God speaks. Moses asks a careful question.
The people will want to know who sent me. They will ask, "What is his name?" The answer comes in 3 steps. First, a riddle. Eye asher eye. I am who I am. Or just as fairly, I will be who I will be. The word is the Hebrew verb to be, and the Hebrew tense does not lock on to one moment. It reaches across past, present, and future at once. The grammar itself is a refusal. In the ancient world, to hold a god's name was to claim a handle on the god. Here, God gives a name that grants no handle. He will not be boxed in. He will not be controlled. Then God turns the verb into a name. I am, spoken by God in the first person, becomes He is, spoken by us in the third person. Eye becomes YHWH, the same root, just a shift in who is speaking. And here the debate begins. The Old Greek translation, the Septuagint, rendered the riddle as ego eimi hoon. I am the one who is. That is the language of being, of pure existence. It pulled the Hebrew toward Greek philosophy, toward a God of timeless, abstract substance. But later Greek translators, Aquila and Theodotion, went the other way. They wrote, I will be who I will be. That is the language of action, of a God known not by what he is in the abstract, but by what he does in history. Being or becoming. 2 readings of one verse. The tension never fully closes, and it is meant not to. This raises a sharp problem. If the name was first revealed to Moses at the bush, why is it already in Genesis? Open Genesis. Abraham builds an altar and calls on the name YHWH. So does Isaac. So does Jacob. The name is on the patriarch's lips long before Moses is born. Yet later, God says something puzzling. In Exodus chapter 6, he tells Moses, I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai, God Almighty. But by my name, YHWH, I did not make myself known to them. That sounds like a flat contradiction of Genesis. How can both be true? There are 2 main roads. The first is the critical road. Some scholars argue that Genesis and Exodus were woven from different written sources. One source used the name freely from the start. Another held that the name was brand new with Moses. A later editor sewed the strands together, and this verse is the visible seam. This is a cornerstone of what is called the documentary hypothesis. We will give that idea a full and fair hearing in its own episode. For now, set it beside the second road. The second road reads the verse more closely, and it turns on one Hebrew word, the word for know. In Hebrew, to know is rarely about information. It means to experience, to enter into, to live through. So read the verse again. The patriarchs heard the name. They used it, but they had not yet seen what the name does. They knew God as El Shaddai, the Almighty who makes promises. They died before the promises came true. Moses' generation was different. At the Exodus, God acted under his own name. He split a sea. He broke an empire. He became known, not as a sound, but as a redeemer. This is the reading of Rashi, of Nachmanides, of the great Jewish scholar Umberto Cassuto. The patriarchs knew the name. Israel came to know the person behind it. And one more point holds the whole thing together. Moses wrote Genesis. So when he tells Abraham's story, he uses the covenant name his readers already worshipped. He does it on purpose. He wants Israel to see one God across the entire book. The God who spoke from the bush is the God who walked with Abraham. Same God, same name. The story is one story. That leads to something most readers walk straight past. The Hebrew Bible uses two main words for the divine. They are not interchangeable. The first is Elohim. It is a general word. It simply means God. It can even be used of the false gods of the nations, the lowercase gods of wood and stone. When Elohim is used of the true God, it points to the cosmic side of him, the transcendent creator, the power above all power, the God of the whole earth and every nation. The second is YHWH. This is not a general word. It is a personal name. It belongs to one God alone. It points to the near side of him, the God who makes a covenant, the God who speaks face to face, the God who is angry and grieved and tender, the God of relationship. Watch how the Bible uses them. Genesis chapter 1 tells of the ordered creation of the entire cosmos. It uses only Elohim, the distant, sovereign maker speaking worlds into place. Then Genesis chapter 2 zooms in. It tells of a garden, a man, a moral command, a relationship. And suddenly, the text shifts to the compound name YHWH Elohim. The signal is deliberate. The transcendent creator of chapter 1 is the very same personal God who now bends down to walk with man. Cassuto argued that this switching is not clumsy stitching of sources at all. It is sophisticated design. The author chooses the name that fits the moment, cosmic power or covenant nearness. Keep this distinction in your mind. It runs underneath the whole Hebrew Bible, and it will matter a great deal when we come to the question of who wrote the Torah. So the name was spoken once, freely. In the time of the kings, ordinary people greeted one another with it.
this day.
It is stitched into
May it be
hundreds
with
of
you, my
personal
friend.
names. Then something changed. After the exile in Babylon, reverence deepened into fear. Two texts hardened the practice. The third commandment against misusing the name, and a law in Leviticus that says a man is put to death for blaspheming the name. Over time, the safest path seemed to be silence. Do not say it at all. When you reach the 4 letters in reading, say a different word in their place. Say, Adonai, my Lord. The fence grew higher. At the Dead Sea community of Qumran, speaking the name aloud could get you expelled for life. The Mishnah later declared that anyone who pronounced the name by its letters had no share in the world to come. By the time the temple fell, in the year 70, The living pronunciation survived in only a few guarded circles. Then those circles closed, and the sound slipped out of memory. The most important name in the book fell silent. Now, the strangest twist in the whole story. Centuries later, Jewish scribes called the Masoretes set out to preserve the Bible's pronunciation. Hebrew was written without vowels, so they invented a system of vowel marks and added them to the consonants. But the name was a problem. They could not write its true vowels because no one was allowed to say it. So they did something clever. They took the vowels of the word Adonai, the word readers were supposed to say instead, and placed those vowels onto the consonants YHWH. It was a reminder, a flashing signal that said, "Do not read this, say Adonai." It was never meant to be sounded out as one word. Then came the misreading. Centuries later, Christian Hebrew scholars examined the marked text. They did not know the scribal trick, so they read it exactly as written. The consonants of one word, the vowels of another. Mashed together, those parts spell something like Yehovah. In Latin, then in English, Jehovah. We can date the mistake. It first appears in writing around 1278 in a book by a Spanish friar named Raymond Martini. It was popularized in 1518 by Petrus Galatinus. It entered English in 1530 when William Tyndale put it into his Pentateuch. The King James Version kept it in 4 verses. By 1901, one English Bible used it in every place. But scholars had already exposed it. Jehovah is a hybrid, the body of one word, the breath of another. A real English word, yes, but not the real name. If not Jehovah, then what? With the original sound lost, scholars had to rebuild it like detectives. They had 3 clues. The first clue is hidden in names. The Hebrew Bible never spells the full name inside a person's name. It uses shortened pieces. Listen for the endings. Eli, Jah. Isaiah, Ea. Jeremiah, Hezekiah, That Yah preserves the opening sound of the name, Yah, and the beginnings too. Jehoshua, Jehonathan. Now fit the pieces together. The name opens with Yah. Its middle letter, Wah, adds a soft W sound. So a shape appears. Yah, a W, and a closing syllable. The second clue comes from the early church. Greek had vowels, so Greek writers tried to spell the name out. Clement of Alexandria wrote Yahweh. Theodoret and Epiphanius recorded Yahweh. Now, by their day, the Greek letter for B had softened to a V sound. So Yahweh was really Yahweh. The clues converge. The third clue is the grammar itself. The name is the third-person form of the verb to be. Run the rules forward, and you land on 2 syllables. In the 1830s, the German scholar Wilhelm Gesenius weighed all of it and settled on Yahweh. That is the reconstruction almost every scholar uses today. But honesty matters here, and so does the debate. Yahweh is the best reconstruction. It is not a proven recording. Take the Samaritan clue. Yahweh may not be the name at all. The Samaritans maintained their own worship separate from that of the Jews, so some scholars think Yahweh is really another word, Yahweh, meaning the beautiful one. If they are right, it was a title of praise, not the name itself. One of our clues may be pointing the wrong way, and from a Jewish colony in Egypt, the name shows up shortened as Yahu, which leads some scholars to argue for 3 syllables, something like Yahuwah. So we hold Yahweh with confidence, but not with certainty. The name that demands reverence still keeps a little of its mystery. Now, back to the small capitals in your Bible. How did the name become Lord on the page. The trail runs through the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, and the primary text behind so much of this series. Here is an old and live debate. When the first Greek translators reached the name, what did they write? For a long time, scholars assumed they wrote Kyrios, the Greek word for Lord, from the very start. But the manuscripts complicate that. One copy of Leviticus writes the name out in Greek letters as Iao. Another Greek scroll keeps the name in actual Hebrew letters, dropped right into the Greek text. Some scribes left a blank space where the name belonged, so the earliest Jewish Greek copies guarded the name. They did not erase it. The clean, total switch to Kyrios looks like a later development in the Christian centuries. Then, the Christian scribes added their own layer. They marked sacred words with a special abbreviation, the nomina sacra. Kyrios was contracted to 2 letters with a line drawn over the top. The name had become a holy shorthand. From Greek, it passed into Latin. Jerome's Vulgate rendered it Dominus, Lord, and from Latin into English. Tyndale printed Lord in large letters wherever the name stood. The King James translators made it small capitals, and where the Hebrew set Adonai right beside the name, they printed the Lord God, with God in small capitals, to avoid writing Lord, Lord. So the small cap Lord you read today is not random. It is an echo. It carries a spoken substitution more than 2,000 years old. Every time you read it, you are obeying an ancient instruction to step around the name. The name is old, older than the pages that carry it, and the ground confirms it. In Egyptian temple lists, carved around 1400 BC, there is a phrase, the land of the Shasu of Yahweh. The name, attached to desert nomads in the south, near Edom and Midian, and carved in the very era of Moses. There is a whole episode on this find. It is called Hidden in Plain Sight, the Habiru, the Shasu, and the God of Israel. You can find it here on the channel. Here the debate sharpens. Some scholars read this as proof that the name began as a small southern desert god, later borrowed by Israel. Others read the same stone the opposite way, as confirmation that the name was already known exactly where and exactly when the Bible places it. The evidence is real. The reading is yours to weigh. The trail continues. The Mesha stele, dating to around 840 BC, is the first certain external witness to YHWH as the God of Israel. A Moabite king boasts of dragging away the sacred vessels of YHWH. Older still, in one sense, are the silver amulets of Ketef Hinnom near Jerusalem around 600 BC. 2 tiny scrolls, rolled tight, inscribed with the priestly blessing. They are the oldest surviving scrap of biblical text on earth, and they carry the name. And far south in Egypt, a Jewish garrison at Elephantine kept a temple and worshipped the god they called Yahu. One last thread, the letter J. There was no J, not in Hebrew, not in Greek, not in Latin, not even in early English. Tyndale wrote Yehuah with an I. The letter J split off from I only in the 15th century, proposed by an Italian grammarian, Trissino, in 1524. Its hard sound came in through Norman French. That single fact explains so much. It is why Yahweh became Jehovah, why Yeshua became Jesus, and why Yehuda became Judah. The same soft Y, now hidden inside a hard English J. Many of the most familiar biblical names carry the divine Yah, and we no longer hear it. Go back to the open Bible. The Lord, 4 small capitals. You have read past them 100 times. Now you know what stands behind them. A name of 4 letters, a voice at a burning bush, a reverence that hardened into silence, a sound that was lost, a hybrid called Jehovah, a reconstruction called Yahweh. A trail of stones and silver across 3,000 years, and underneath all of it, one declaration: I am, the God who keeps his name by keeping his word. He told Moses who he is. He has not changed. That brings us to a bigger question. How did the 5 books become one Torah? We'll take it up next time, and we will give the documentary hypothesis its full and fair hearing.